Hey everybody, our next video is going to be on color theory. We are going to make a color wheel that we create using this palette of ink, or I'm sorry, paint. This is a little different from these paints are a little bit different because they're more artist quality, meaning the pigments that make them up are very pure and higher quality, thus they're more expensive. Each of these tubes is like $10 a piece. So to get a tube of paint, it's like $10. So as you can see, just a little dab. But what's really great is that these will last you for a really long time, and you can mix a ton of colors with them. So a little bit about color theory. You probably have seen a color wheel before. We talked about this in our last stamp camp. I've learned a lot more about color theory since then. And the basics are still true. You start with red, yellow, and blue, and you can create basically any color. Now, modern color theory starts with a slightly different color, still the yellow, but instead of red, we're actually going to start with magenta. And then instead of blue, we're going to start with a cyan color, which is a type of blue. And then these three colors we're going to use to mix basically almost any color. Now you can start with the typical red, blue, and yellow, those primary colors that we learned in like elementary school. But what happens is they make kind of not the prettiest colors. And we want pretty colors, right? That's what we're all about, is pretty colors. So these colors are they're like your typical rainbow, but these colors are going to be every single color in between those colors on the rainbow, if you know what I mean. Okay, so a little bit about how to choose colors or what colors look good together, because that's sometimes so difficult. There are basically colors that are along the color wheel, meaning they're next to one another on the color wheel. So like green and blue and violet. These are going to look good together, or like blue violet technically. These colors are going to look good together because they're near one another on the color wheel. Or over here, reds and oranges and yellows. We kind of already know that a little bit, but it's good to know that colors that are next to one another somewhere on the color wheel are going to look good together. In addition to that, there's also complementary colors. Those are going to be directly across from each other. They are going to look good next to one another, but they're not necessarily going to mix. In fact, when you mix them, you usually get a neutral color like a gray or a brown color. Sometimes we often refer to that as mud. So if I had, for instance, blue, and I put it next to orange, that's going to look good together. Okay, there's a sports team whose colors are blue and orange. It's a Florida college. Maybe it's the University of Florida. I don't know. The Gators, I think. I'm not sure. But their team's colors are blue and orange, and they look good next to one another. But if I mix blue and orange together, I'm going to get like an ugly color. There's also what's called split complementaries. Okay, so this little chart kind of shows that. So split complementaries is going to be orange plus blue violet plus blue green. Again, these colors are going to look good next to one another. So it's a good color combination, but they're not colors you're necessarily going to want to mix together. And then it continues. There's a triad of colors, which is this orange, violet, and green. Orange, violet, green. So these, again, are colors that'll look good together, but not mixed. All right, mixing is the ones that are along the color wheel, analogous colors. Okay, now what's kind of fun about this is it will tell you what you get when you add certain colors. So for instance, if I took green and added some red to it, this is what I'm going to get, is this color, whatever that is. If I added some yellow to this color, I'm going to get this. If I add blue to this color, I'm going to get this, and so on. If I add white, I'm going to get this, and if I add black, I'm going to get this. So these little things you can just kind of spin and you see, you know, when I add white to red, I get pink. We kind of knew that, right? So when I add violet, or when I add yellow to violet, I get brown. Okay, let's flip the color wheel over, and where is violet from yellow? It's directly across. And so when I mix those two together, I get brown, but when I put them next to one another, I've got the Minnesota Vikings. So you can see colors can look really nice next to one another, maybe red and green. You probably have seen that before, Christmas time. But when you mix red and green, so if I add red to green, it says I get this kind of deep purple color. It kind of depends, but anyway, I get a more neutral color. So let's take a look and apply some of this information to our actual paints, because this is all great if you're looking at this color wheel, but let's actually see how it works in real life. So for this exercise, you're going to want your sketchbook. Okay. So I'm going to pull out my sketchbook, and you also have a little template that we made for you. This is a color wheel, and it's really easy to use. We're just going to trace the insides of it with a pencil, and I do it kind of light. I don't need this to be really dark. If you like the outline of things, you can most certainly follow this up with a marker if you want, but you don't have to. We're going to make a couple of these, so you can kind of do whatever you would like with them. All right. Oops. Gotta get a little more. Used up all my lead. Okay, so there is my cute little color wheel on here. And whenever I do this, I like to jot a few notes on here. So I'm going to do my color wheel. And I'm going to use my, these are, well, my cyan, yellow, magenta paint. Okay. And then I'm leaving the space open because we're going to kind of use it to mix things a little bit. Okay. Now that you've got your paint on here, first and very important, we need clean water to do this exercise. If you have dirty water, you're going to contaminate the colors, especially yellow, and you don't want to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of water, and actually I'll take my pipette because this just makes the process go a little quicker. I'm going to kind of add a little bit to my paint and mix them up, because what I need to do is kind of activate the paint and mix it up a little bit. All right. Now, in a perfectly scientific ideal world, you would have the exact ratio of water and paint to be equal, and then you would mix exact ratios of those together to get the perfect color wheel. Now, that's never going to happen, really, realistically. So we're going to approximate, and we're going to kind of judge a little bit of what's going to happen. Okay, so now what I want to do is have a little bit of each of this color kind of out. So I'm going to pick up some of this with my brush and then just sort of put it in here. So I'll do a couple of these. I'll skip some space and put some more over here in my magenta. Okay, so I'm just mixing up the color on my brush with the water and then transferring it to an empty well in my palette. Okay, then I'm going to rinse my brush off, make sure it's really clean, because we'll know if it's not. I think I flicked a little color into this yellow. Yeah, so that's that. Luckily, it was just watery color, so it's no big deal. This still looks nice and vibrant. Now, if you do contaminate the color, you can just kind of use your brush to sort of, I don't know if rinse off is the right word, but get rid of some of that excess color. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make 3 wells with my yellow. Yellow is the trickiest color because it's so light and it's so easy to contaminate. So I want to make sure I've got some nicely mixed up yellow in 3 little spots here. Okay, and then I'll rinse my brush off really well, and I'll do 2 more in my cyan. Okay, so we want to kind of mix all that in. So this is a little different from your typical elementary school colors. The yellow obviously is exactly the same, but the magenta and the cyan are a bit different from one another. So now I've got 2 wells that are blue or cyan, 2 wells that are magenta, and 3 wells that are yellow. I'm going to clean my brush, make sure it's really clean. Okay, and let's get started. So I'm going to take from each of these wells some of the pure paint and just paint it on. Okay, so I've got my yellow. And again, once you paint, you'll get a feel for like how much paint versus water you need. That's part of doing all these exercises, is to kind of understand that. Okay, now I'm going to clean my brush really well, make sure it's nice and clean. I'm going to pick up some of the magenta. I'm going to skip 1, 2, 3 spots and then do magenta. Okay, same thing. I'm just coloring this on here. And if you go outside the lines, that's no problem. We will never tell. Clean my brush really good, and then I'm going to skip 1, 2, 3, and then I will have my cyan. Okay, and this, once again, you'll just start getting a feel for how much, and I'm really going outside the lines here. Oops, my bad. But it really doesn't matter too much. Okay, so these are our 3 primary colors. If you've ever looked on a magazine, maybe that wasn't cut totally evenly, the magazine is going to show these 3 colors plus probably black, and that is literally how magazines are printed, just with these 3 base colors. And then a mixture of them is what makes every other color that comprises the infinite number of colors there actually are in this world. Okay, now let's start mixing. Here's where things are kind of fun. I'm going to start with just a little swatch of magenta right here. And then I'm going to mix my magenta in with my yellow. Now, whenever you're adding something to yellow, start with just a teeny bit. So I'm going to pick from my blob of paint, I'm going to pick up just a little bit of magenta, and I'm going to add it to my yellow. And what I have here is a pretty light shade. So when I look at this, I'm thinking to myself, that's pretty light. I need a little more magenta. So I'm going to pick this up. It's actually, I did not clean my brush, and I should have. It's important to clean your brush between every single one of these steps to really get the best results. Okay, so now here we go. And I'm going to paint that on there, and that looks a little better, like what you would assume you'd get when you mix magenta and yellow. You get kind of a shade of red. All right, so I'm going to take that shade of red and paint it on here. Now, this is not the end-all, be-all color. It could be that you get, you know, depending on how much water you're using, how much paint you're using, you might have a more vibrant form of this, a darker color or a lighter color. Okay, but that's our first color. Now what we want to do is take this color and we want to add some yellow to it, because when you take yellow and then add it to this color, we're going to get this color. Okay, so I'm going to take a little bit more yellow with my clean brush and mix it in. Okay, and here's why I cheat on the side, is I want to kind of judge where are we in the spectrum. Do we need a little bit more? Clean off my brush. Pick up a little more yellow so I keep my yellow nice and pure. And then I will go back, and now we're kind of like that first color we had, and that looks pretty good. We're going to paint this on. Sometimes when colors dry, by the way, they look a little different, and that can happen. And this is again not like, this is just an exercise. It's not going to be perfect for sure, but we just want to know what we might have. Okay, now I can either come back to this or I can start a new a new one where I'm going to really mix in a lot of magenta, because now we want to go to the other side where it's more magenta. Okay, so we've got magenta plus yellow, but more magenta. So this is like half and half. This is like more yellow and less magenta. And then this is going to be less yellow and more magenta. Okay, and you can do a little test over here. That looks pretty good. So now we're going to have kind of a magenta red color, a red color, and kind of an orangey color. And of course, between each of these shades, there's more colors, but this is just kind of a general. Okay, I'm going to clean my brush really well, and now we're going to mix magenta and blue, or cyan, sorry. It's cyan, but I keep saying blue. Okay, so now I'm going to come over here. I'm going to pick up some of my blue and mix it in with my magenta. And this is what we've been looking for. So pretty. So we've got some purple here. And I would say that looks pretty good, to be honest. You can dab just a teeny bit more blue or a teeny bit more pink in there, or magenta, to get to see, but I think that looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to paint that in purple. Okay, so if I add even amounts of both of these colors, this is what I get. Then we'll do the same thing we did, where we'll add a little bit of more magenta to one and a little bit more cyan in the concentration, and see what we get. Okay, so what I can do is take some of this and add it to, I'm going to add it to my blue. Okay, and sometimes you kind of have to do all of it. It sort of depends on what concentrations you've got. Now when I do this, you can see what I get is more of a typical blue color, and I kind of like testing that out. Okay, so you can see this is definitely more blue than it is purple, and so it's going to be the nice mixture between these two colors, and we'll paint that in. Looks great. Okay, I'm going to rinse my brush off. I'm going to repeat this, but again, we want more magenta in the mix. So this was my original purple. So I'm going to pick up some magenta over here and mix it into my purple. And then what I want is more of a magenta color. So I'm kind of testing it out next to the one I first did. I need some more magenta, so I'm going to clean my brush off. Cleaning your brush between, it seems like kind of a hassle, but it's so important to make sure you don't contaminate the colors. And then when I do this one, oh, that looks good. And so this is going to be a combination of more magenta and less cyan. And there we go. So that looks beautiful. We're almost done. Last one is cyan plus yellow. We know when we mix those two together in an even amount, we should get green, right? So I'm going to pick up some cyan, add it to my yellow, and see what we've got. Ooh, looks good. You think this is still a little bit on the yellow side. So I'm going to try just a little bit more cyan. Sometimes we can go too far, but this looks even better. Okay, so this is going to be my green. That first color might have actually been okay. I'm going to rinse my brush and put a little bit more yellow back in here. Yeah, it's about the same. So it's kind of a playing with the ratios. Okay, then I'm gonna take this mixture and add it to the yellow I've got sitting here, and ooh, look at that. That's a fun, nice light green. So this is obviously a higher concentration of my yellow with the cyan. You can see I got a little bleeding happening at the bottom there, but I'm not too worried about it. unless it starts to really take things over, I will just kind of let that be. Okay, oh, it's spreading a little more, so we'll stop it. Okay, and then last but not least, by the way, this is not my best coloring work in terms of staying in the lines, but I'm okay with it. Last but not least, we're going to add some more of this green, our original green, to this cyan. Okay, probably need all of it. And then what we should get here is kind of a bluish green color. And we still might, yeah, that's still a little bit too blue. But that looks a little better. Maybe just a little more. And there we go. That looks pretty good. Okay, so here's our color. Oh my gosh, I'm so not doing good painting work, but we'll just dab that off a little bit. Luckily, my cyan is dry, so it's not blending. It's just kind of moving over there. Okay, so here we go. You can see our practice swatches help us figure out if we've got kind of the right colors. And then I'm going to add onto this that we have, let's see, I'm going to use my marker. Okay, oops, that's a night of navy, not a black. We want a black one. Here we go. Okay, so I'm going to put magenta, cyan, and yellow. Okay, those are my primary colors. And then my secondary colors, all right, are going to be the ones right in between. So the purple, so this is a secondary. Our kind of reddish color is a secondary. And our green. Okay, so those are secondary. And then our tertiary colors are going to be our kind of orange, our reddish orange, our reddish violet, our blue green, and our yellow green. Okay, I'm going to mark those with tertiary colors rather than writing them all out because they don't necessarily have specific names in our practice here. Okay, so those are my tertiary colors. Now, in the next video, I'm going to show you another color wheel. This one we're going to do with kind of some different colors. Instead of using our typical primary colors, we're going to pull some colors out of our paint palette that are not typical and see what the results look like.